You said, so on Truth Social, you said that you were going to cut aid from South Africa. Will you plan to cut aid across other African nations, and why South Africa?
No, it's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
And on the Fed.
It is often true that if you want to understand the current situations that are facing the country, whether good or bad, you need to understand the recent history of a country, even sometimes a bit of a distance. It is true that we are made by our past in some way or the other. It doesn't mean that your past holds you back. It just means that most of who you are, probably it is because of where you come from, the family that you come from, the kind of environment that you actually grew up in. I want you to pay attention as I discuss a very sensitive topic today, which is very dear to my heart as a South African. We have seen in the news, if you haven't, well, come out of the rock and join the rest of the world. We have seen recently in the news that the minority group of South Africa, which is probably the farmers, which happen to and could be Afrikaner, which is the Afrikaans-speaking white people in South Africa, and whomever else had joined them, reached out to the international community because apparently they painted a picture, rather a faulty one and a very dangerous one, as a South African. They painted a picture that unfortunately they are somehow, someway in danger in their own country, just because Ramaphosa, our president, recently signed a bill that stated that South Africa can actually expropriate land without compensation for the sake of public use. Now, if you would want to understand what is really happening, I wanted you to also watch this, which is the Susan story.
I think I've got some pretty large prejudices. I think I'm very prejudiced against the foreign press, particularly the American press, because I've come up against a lot of discrimination myself while I've been here. As a South African, everywhere I go, particularly in the schools, at the moment I mention that I'm from South Africa, I'm discriminated against in the sense that, well, the picture in South Africa, the situation has been so badly distorted and so exaggerated because racial news is sensational news. And so journalists have so distorted the picture in South Africa that when I come over here, I'm looked down upon. And I've really felt this discrimination. I haven't been treated as just an individual and a human being. And I feel that the press is responsible for this.
Well, I've been wanting to ask you a question for a long time. When we all came here, you just took to me. You like me very much, I can see, and I like you. But I know you are a South African, and I'm an African. But why is it that out here you are very friendly towards me, but down in South Africa, you don't do the same towards the Negroes that are living there? Can you tell me?
Well, it's the whole setup. I mean, South Africa, we have a pattern of life which is different to any other country in the world. Because you have the white population, and which came to the country in 1652, and they are much more highly developed, coming from Europe with European backgrounds and traditions. And they have developed the country and have developed a highly civilized community. Whereas the Negro, the Bantu as we call them in Africa, in South Africa, is primitive, on a very primitive level. And the barrier in South Africa isn't so much color as civilization and economically.
Excuse me, on that point, we get into a very, very tense ground recently. You talked about this question of it not being a racial struggle, but a struggle of civilization. Well, personally, you see, I sympathize with your situation, because I couldn't live in a country, your economic position, and perhaps your future well-being as a nation might be in danger if you allow the strong-hearted, driving Africans to take over the government. That is, of course, what will happen if they're given the vote.
Is a misconception that exists. Most people think that the white settlers came to South Africa and took the land from people who were...
So.
Oh, no, it is not, and I'll prove it to you. Who came to South Africa and took it away as the whites came here to America and took it away from the indigenous occupants. In 1652, when the first white settlers arrived at the Cape, the Bantu, as they are now known, the Negroes in South Africa, were still coming down from equatorial Africa, migrating. And it's a fact that they had not yet entered what is now known as South Africa, the borders of South Africa. The only indigenous occupants in Africa, South Africa at that time, were the Bushmen. And they were exterminated by the Bantu coming down.
Excuse me, Susan, on that point, I think you've read your history upside down.
How come?
Yes, you see, the exact thing that happened was that these Dutch men, I think they were Dutch men, they haven't got a place in their homeland.
Oh,
Not
no,
a means of living.
I can just prove...
Let me finish.
All right, and then I can prove you how wrong your historical facts are.
Oh, no, you know, your history is South African history. Mine is a bipartisan history. Well, this men came without any means of livelihood in their own country, with their economic background without any meaning at all. They came to South Africa. And the real fact is that as they came and there was an influx of these Dutch people from their unwanted homes, as there was an influx, the Bantus they were pushing the Bantus up into the country, till came the Zulu War, in which the Zulus were finally defeated in the most bitter and agonizing struggle they had against these Africans, you call them? Yes.
I don't know where you get your historical facts from. I really
I
don't.
got my historical fact from, I think, is it Mr. Trevelyan? Is in British history.
Oh,
that's far
Mr.
better
George
than...
Trevelyan knows nothing then, and I'll say that. Because it so happens that these penniless whites, as you call them, didn't come out because they didn't have homes or because of any kind of persecution. They were sent out as officials of the Dutch East India Company to establish a refreshment station for ships passing around passing around the bottom of the Cape. Just as the Dutch settlers were sent out to America by the Dutch West India Company to settle and to make a refreshment station here. Now, I think if you had to turn around to those Dutch settlers who came out and said that they came out because they were penniless, they'd be just as indignant as I am. And as you say that the white settlers came and pushed the Bantu back,
Yes.
It's a fact that the whites went into the interior of Africa and didn't come into contact never even saw a Bantu until 1795, which was practically 100 years, more than 100 years after they had arrived in South Africa.
How did you have the Zulu War? What brought it about?
The Zulus had already, by the time, I think you must have a look at a map. Zululand is very far from the Cape, where these people arrived. And in 100 years, within 100 years, after the arrival of the white settlers, the Zulus had by that time, the Zulus are a part of the Bantu group, had already come down to Natal. And then you've got the two groups, the one coming from the north, the one coming from the south, and they met. And that's where you get the Zulu War.
It was not even a clash in the sense you are taking it. It was even the British.
It was a clash.
The British in their benevolence, or in fact in their, because they've seen the facts that this thing is not good, they even were exercising a tempering force upon the people.
Boniface, just to make things more complicated for you and Susan, I've heard a third interpretation of this, which might settle it. That was the fact that the Bantu were a migratory people. And that it may be true that at some point when the whites came in, there weren't any Bantus there because they were migrating somewhere else. But look, this is all past history now. I'd like to hear something from Mesfin and Amelia on their interpretation of South African history, but almost rather. Let's bring it up to the present, can't we?
Yes.
Yes, we bring it up.
Well, come back just a minute, Sue, to your violent prejudices against the press because they're misrepresenting what goes on in South Africa. Do you want to clarify that a bit?
Yes, I would.
Will you?
No. Well, I know one outstanding example of misrepresentation. We read in an American, I think it was a magazine, I won't give the name, although I could very easily. This journalist quoted Dr. D.F. Malan, who is an ex-Prime Minister of South Africa, as saying, and I quote, "The Negro does not need a home. he can sleep under a tree. Well, not only is this absolutely fictitious, but he forgot to mention the fact that brick and concrete trees, known to most people as houses, are costing thousands, millions of dollars of the white taxpayers' money annually.
What did you say? I didn't get the point. You said what houses?
Well, you see, this journalist said that Dr.
Yes,
Milan...
I got that point. You say what houses costing the government millions of dollars?
I
What
said
houses?
concrete and brick and cement houses for the Bantu peoples.
But these are the Bantus that are working for you in the factories. How did you get the money? They got the money, they mined the gold, got the gold, and you sold the gold outside. You got the money and you say the money is yours.
Of course
You
it
can't
is.
do that's a contradiction,
Look,
please.
we came along, we bought the machinery, we developed the mines.
From where did you get the machinery from the mines in Johannesburg? Do you own the
No,
mines?
we got
Who
our
worked the
machinery.
mines?
We got our machinery from Great Britain.
Who
From
worked-
the money that was picked, what was got with the diamonds and
How
the
did you get the
were
diamonds out of the
alluvial.
ground?
No native labor there,
How did you
Boniface.
get the diamonds out of the ground?
They
I want
weren't
that.
dug out of the ground. They were alluvial diamonds. No native labor there, my boy.
What do the relatives do? You know what, Suzanne, one point you must get right down to the crux of the matter is that in this country, the Africans are really the backbone of your economy.
I
And
want
it
to
is
point
one of
out
that
the fact.
cases where you get this question of man's inhumanity to man. And every day you come here to complain about misrepresentation in the American press. In the actual matter of fact, the American press is giving a fairly good view of the whole situation
you been
because
to
they
South
have a color
Africa?
problem themselves.
Have you been to South Africa, my boy?
I wouldn't even pay a penny to go there.
Well, then,
That's
how
for
can you
sure.
talk? How can you talk?
Because I have the facts. People come in there, get every people, no means of living. How can I go there? I want a house, I want a home, I want position in society.
Well, look, they're getting it. They're getting
let's
exactly what they want.
I'd love to hear from Amelia and Mesfin what if their picture of South Africa is the same as Boniface's
It
is.
should be the same weight.
Actually, I myself am against the South Africans because I mean the white people in the South Africa because in whose house can one come and take away
They haven't
the
taken away the
property? Because what they are doing now, the white people are mining and taking the property for themselves, and that's what they shouldn't do. Because the native people who are living there, they should have what is the property of theirs. Well, actually, before I came from Ethiopia, I was reading about this in the press, and they were pretty hot about it. They were against the white people. The same thing could happen to them, of course.
On this oppression business, if you say the Bantu in South Africa are oppressed, how do you account for this fact? That every year, regularly, hundreds of thousands of Bantu and Negroes from other territories adjoining South Africa, such as Portuguese, East Africa, etc., are invading our country illegally in spite of the law.
We're gone.
Are they coming for oppression? They know what goes on in South Africa, and they come back year and year again. Those who have worked in South Africa and have been sent back, come back. Are they coming back to seek oppression?
Your this does not answer what I'm driving at. The Africans have the land. They
Oh,
are
no,
there
they do
before
not
you.
have the land, and
They
they were
mine
not
the
there
gold.
before us.
All right, wait a minute, Susan. Let me get my point straight before you go. They mine the lands. They get the diamonds. You sell the diamonds outside, and when you get the diamonds, you say they are not to be given their own fair share of the quota. Have you read "Cry of the Beloved Country"?
Yes, I have.
How?
It's a one-sided
Look,
view.
one-sided view, and it was written by an European. How could Europeans be having one-sided view about their own
They're
king and
radicals in
king?
every nation.
Radicals? You are radicals in South Africa, then?
Oh, no, we're not.
Look, Mesfin was
Unfortunate, and it is very true, that a lot of the white community in South Africa brought up their kids to believe that the things that they do, even when it disadvantages the brown person, it is for the good of them and as well as the brown person that is disadvantages. There is this lie and deception that white people have believed that they are the best thing that ever happened to South Africa. They could have came up with some improvements in terms of the Western way of doing things, but the truth of the matter is the most important thing about life is not necessarily the machines that you use or the cost of your soul, but it is the quality of life that you actually are living and the dignity to the things that God has so freely and naturally gave you. So dating back to 1952, when the first settlers came to Cape of Good Hope at the time, we know for sure that there's always been people in South Africa, unlike the claim of Susan, there's been people of the San, the Khoisan, as well as the Bantu people, which is the Zulus, the Xhosas, and the Ndebeles as well. So South Africa has always had people. This is just, unfortunately, a deception that they were not people, because obviously people who settled at the time and actually moved people from where they used to be and did something called segregation, which later on was started officially in 1948 by D.F. Malan, the government of the time, or the prime minister, whatever he was called of the time, where they actually started doing a policy, government policy, to segregate different ethnicities according to how they looked, meaning the Indian people would be with Indians, the brown people would be with brown, and the colored people would be, which is the originally, I would say, the Khoisan people, the San people. Of course, also colored refers to the mix between brown and white. And I'm intentionally calling what has been referred to by the rest of the world as black, brown, because according to my understanding, there is no black person. I don't think I'm black. And if white people think they're white, it's okay. But I don't think I'm black. So this channel is specifically to expose the truth of what is really happening in South Africa versus what the world wants to believe, or what the minority white people in South Africa that wants to divide the country want the rest of the world to believe. I do acknowledge that not all white people in South Africa have that kind of mindset, but it is unfortunate that there is quite a number of South African white people that still has a segregation mindset. And unfortunately, it's almost as if they believe that they are God's gift to South Africa, because these white people also claim to be Christians. Like the people that you'd find in Orania and say they're Christians, they just want to be alone for whatever reason. I wonder if they think heaven has a corner called Orania where they're just going to be on their own. Unfortunately, God does not support this kind of mindset. And I have to call it what it is, because a lot of South African churches are even scared to some extent to discuss politics. I was once in a church, by the way, where we were told in Cape Town not to discuss politics and not to discuss any form of, religion, whatever that is, because somehow, some way, they thought that adults don't have what it takes to discuss those kind of things. How on earth do you tell adults not to discuss topics that are actually affecting them every single day? So it is unfortunate that a lot of churches, while they feed people the word of God, they don't necessarily want, with the sound mind that God has given us, want to address the issues that are facing people every single day. South Africa still has some of the poorest neighborhoods in the rest of the world, and the gap between the rich and the poor is one of the highest in the world. And you want to tell me that we just have to look ahead and forget about the fact that apartheid system has such a poor negative impact on the South African economy, especially affecting the brown people. Most white people feel very uncomfortable discussing these very crucial topics that are affecting an average brown person, because a lot of the brown people, when they start working, they actually have to take care of their families. You have to take your sister or someone in the family to school. It's something that is called black text. But remember, I'm referring to brown people. So this black text, unfortunately, it puts the brown person at a bit of a disadvantage, because you're almost sort of like starting behind. And white people don't really want to talk about it, nor do they even want to address what we call white privileges, because at least they have a bit of inheritance and a bit of land and a bit of this. If you really are South African, regardless of the color that you are, the best thing you can do for South Africa is to face the real issues that are facing South Africa. And if God gives you the solution, to use the solution for the betterment of everyone. If you are a white South African, you feel like you should be segregated from the rest of South Africa because you are so scared that what your grandfathers did to the brown and other ethnic groups of South Africa is exactly what we're going to do to you. Most South Africans are not like that, and they don't think like that. I have to admit that unfortunately a seed of violence to some extent have been sown because there have been a lot of wars and a lot has taken place in South Africa since the colonialists settled on our land. Not to say we didn't have probably tribal conflicts, whatever that is, but I'm talking about serious brutality that is inhuman to people just because you want to take what is God given to them. Look, we don't want to stay in the past. We want to move ahead. Of course, that's the best thing. But how do we move ahead when people are constantly playing the cards behind them? There is a lot of white South Africans that are constantly playing cards behind. There's a lot of companies in Cape Town, for example, that are only white. And you ask yourself, in a country that the majority is 80% black and the minority 7.9 white, how do you even start to just consider to want to employ a certain kind of people? Are you communicating without communicating? Well, you have anyway a right to do whatever you want. But I'm just saying that injustice doesn't last. The reason why a lot of white people that have that kind of mentality are living in fear of brown people because they're paranoid that something is going to happen to their houses, or one day brown people are going to wake up and go, oh yes, let's start a civil war, or whatever the case is 30 years on. Like seriously, everybody wants to move ahead, but we don't want people to play dumb, and we don't want people to constantly raise this cut of don't ask for what belongs to you, just let me have it. It's like a 2-year-old who has a cookie and they found it on a table and they took it, and the owner of the cookie comes and say, can I have a cookie? And they start crying and calling on to mommy, which is the international community, to say, please come and help me because I just want to have my cookie. And this person would not let have the cookie that I just found on the table, but it's not yours. And the whole point is that how about you maybe have a mindset of sharing as opposed to this mindset that a lot of white people have to say, oh, but I worked hard for it. Yes, I got it from my grandfather, but I worked hard for it, and it's not yours, it's mine. And they don't want to, talk about the past, but when they go to therapies, they sit down and they actually discuss what happened when they were growing up. It is unfortunately such a narrow mindset to say to people that they must forget about the past while they're being impacted by the apartheid system that took place just 30 years ago. A lot of countries, at least it takes them a while to build up the country. And for whatever reason, I think some white people think that, just forget about it. Forget about your past. But like, I can go to a therapist and sit down with a therapist and talk about what happened when I was young, because why not? I can do it, but you can't. You can't talk about your past. Don't let brown people, don't let anyone undermine your story. Your story is extremely important. It is extremely important to note in South Africa that there are people who don't want to build a united South Africa, and it's their choice. It's important to also remember as a brown person that a job is not going to solve all your problems. God has given us talents. My advice to you is to use your God-given talent. You can get a job, but use your God-given talent. Pray for wisdom. Let God guide you with love, and also know that God has given us the power to actually overcome all the weapons of the enemy, which those weapons are to undermine who he has made you to be as a person. It is to put you down and to make you seem like you are not valuable, whatever the case is. We love people. Anybody who says that, oh my gosh, like you're being racist, darling, let me tell you what is being racist. Being racist is to think from a young age that you're better than another person just because of they're different from you. That is being racist. Being racist is shouting people are racist every time we talk about different preferences of where we come from. Whether you're brown or you're Indian or whatever the case is, then you feel uncomfortable and you say people are racist. Being racist is going to your braais and not discussing the real issues that are facing the country, but thinking and discussing how you can regroup so that you can have your little town. That is being racist. On the other side, I'm here to expose the dark truths of exactly the things that are going on in modern South Africa every single day. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people are affected. People talk about the dangers of South Africa. Oh, South Africa, there's so much crime. Can I tell you why South Africa has so much crime? First and foremost is the fact that South Africa was made by violence. The South Africa that which used to be the Union of South Africa, it was literally built by violence, and from the violence people had to flee for their lives, and that violence, that's how people actually learned to defend themselves. A lot of men had to leave their families to go and fight in the in the streets or wherever it was, and they had to defend their lives. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there's so much poverty that people do what they know. Okay, if I don't know how to do anything else, but I'm going to rob, whatever the case is, that's exactly how people are going to deal with this thing. A lot of people are angry. I have to be honest, angry. Why? Because life has moved on, but people have forgotten how the apartheid system has disadvantaged the majority, such that it has to be intentional. Without help, you can't make it on your own. Without intentional help and exposure to the right resources and working with people that have been there, it's very hard to get out of certain situations. A will alone is not just going to make it. It's a good start, but it's good for us to actually regroup, come into our communities and help each other, not tear each other down, because that is a sign of self-hate. Brown companies, you have to start working together. You have to start looking for talent to groom, and you have to start thinking out of the box. You have to start thinking different. You have to stop thinking that a job is going to rescue you, and you have to, and I don't blame brown people that are reluctant to speak against the system, because corporate South Africa make up the most of South Africa's GDP. And that money, well, some of it come into the country, but most of it is actually, it goes offshore. And then they print newspapers about how the government is so corrupt and how the government is doing this. Well, the truth of the matter is that every governance in the world has some level of corruption, okay? That's the first thing. Do your research. The second thing is that South African governance, as much as it can have its own faults, it is for everyone, including you, the white people who think that everything that is wrong with South Africa, it's not the apartheid system and what happened. No, it's just the government. The problems started somehow, some way when the brown people took over. I mean, how much more can you show someone that you don't trust them than to actually write them off before they even start? That's the other thing. And the thing is, if you truly want to see a better South Africa, you will respect your neighbor. You will build up the values that make the country. You will not run to the internationals for a solution that only benefits you. When you see a problem that is affecting an average South African, you will want to attend to it because you understand that if it's affecting them, it will somehow, some way affect you. The reason why most white communities are afraid of even going to election is paranoia. It's fear. They are afraid because they know what they've done. So they think people will do what they've done. Well, to be honest, an average brown person doesn't think like that. And we're not really interested in doing that, as I had said to you. We just want people to live side by side and actually build our own lives and build our communities and build a South Africa that everybody can live in. I'm going to leave you with a scripture. Deuteronomy 10:17. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and Lord, the great, mighty, and awe-aspiring God, showing no partiality. So for people that call themselves Christians, but in the dark places, they're busy doing other things that are actually sowing division. Let me tell you something. You might think that the road that you're taking on earth is right and you're getting all these things and you're getting your way. But I'm telling you now, and I'm warning you, that at the end of it is death. At the end of it, it's depravity. At the end of it, it's fear. At the end of it, it's anxiety. Look at your life and ask yourself, with all the things that you have, why do you still not have peace? There are people with money in South Africa, but they don't have peace. They're always drunk. They're trying to do all kinds of things because, unfortunately, they know in the heart of hearts that how they view others is not right, but they can't help it because they're surrounded by that kind of mindset. No child is born racist. Racism is taught, and it's about time that we call a spade because unfortunately some white people go overseas and lie about how things are in South Africa, whilst they're the ones who are spreading the negativity and dividing the country and causing all kinds of troubles. It's not enough that they've had the privileges that they've had, but they just don't want the brown person to rise and have the same, if not more, privileges. Well, let me tell you something. Those days are over. Brown people are rising, and there's nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is hopefully to love yourself so that you can actually love another person, or, well, get healing, because people who want to see people down is people that are broken and insecure, that it doesn't make them feel good until they put others down. South Africa will stand because God is for us, and when God is for us, who can be against us? And when I say us, I mean people who genuinely want to see the right things in place, not people who have an agenda, looks like they're for other people, smile to you for a second, when you turn away they actually want to do other things. No, that's not the South Africa that we're going to build, and that's South Africa has come to an end. A new kind of South Africa is emerging, whether you like it or not. If I was you, I might take Trump's offer to move overseas, because if you're not contributing to the country, why do you be part of it?